The bitter Montana wind howled across the frozen landscape, cutting through layers of clothing like icy daggers. Ethan Davidson pulled his worn wool collar higher against the biting cold as he trudged through knee-deep snow toward his barn. The thermometer outside his farmhouse had read 15 below zero, the coldest morning of the winter. The sun hadn't yet created the horizon, but the pre-dawn light cast an eerie blue glow across the pristine white landscape. Ethan's boots crunched rhythmically through the crusty top layer of snow as he made his way to check on his livestock. At 58, these morning chores had become as natural as breathing, each step automatic after 30 years of working this land alone. But this morning would be different. This morning would change everything. The first sign that something was amiss came when Ethan noticed unusual tracks in the snow, small, erratic impressions that wandered in circles before disappearing under a fresh drift. His weathered brow furrowed as he followed their path with his eyes. Those weren't rabbit tracks, and they were too small for a coyote. That's when he heard it. So faint he almost convinced himself it was just the wind. A whimper, barely audible, coming from beneath the snow. Ethan's heart quickened as he carefully approached the spot. Kneeling down, he began gently brushing away the powder snow. What he found made his breath catch in his throat. There, partially buried in white, lay a tiny puppy, no bigger than his two hands. Its black and brown fur was covered in frost, its small body completely still. "Oh no," Ethan whispered, his calloused hands hovering uncertainly over the motionless form. The puppy couldn't have been more than a few months old. Its eyes were closed, frozen shut, and no breath stirred from its tiny nose. For a moment, Ethan remained frozen himself, torn between the urge to help and the practical voice in his head telling him it was too late. He'd seen enough death on the farm to know when something was beyond saving. But something about this puppy, this tiny fighter who'd struggled through the night, tugged at his heart. "Damn it," he muttered, quickly shrugging off his heavy coat. With gentle movements that belied his rough exterior, Ethan wrapped the puppy in his warm jacket, cradling it close to his chest. He turned back toward the farmhouse, his livestock momentarily forgotten. "Hold on, little one," he whispered into the bitter morning air. "Just hold on." Inside the farmhouse, Ethan moved with urgent purpose. He cleared his kitchen table with one sweep of his arm, sending bills and yesterday's coffee mug clattering to the floor. With trembling hands, he laid the bundle containing the puppy on the wooden surface, carefully unwrapping his coat. The puppy looked even smaller in the harsh kitchen light, its tiny body completely still. Ethan's fingers, rough from years of farm work, fumbled as he reached for the space heater stored beneath his sink. Come on," he muttered, plugging it in and positioning it nearby. He grabbed every blanket he could find, creating a nest of warmth around the frozen pup. His hands shook as he reached for his phone, dialing the only veterinarian in town. "Dr. Harper, it's Ethan Davidson. I need your help." The vet's voice crackled through the speaker, heavy with early morning fatigue. "Ethan, what's wrong?" "Found a puppy in the snow, completely frozen. I don't even know if—" His voice trailed off as he stared at the motionless bundle. "Ethan," Dr. Harper's voice softened with sympathy, "if it's been out all night in these temperatures—" "Just tell me what to do," Ethan interrupted, a note of desperate determination in his voice. "Please." Dr. Harper sighed. "Warm them slowly. Too fast could shock their system. Check for a heartbeat, but be prepared, Ethan. The chances are—" Ethan pressed his fingers gently against the puppy's chest, holding his breath. For several agonizing seconds there was nothing. Then, so faint he thought he might have imagined it, a flutter beneath his fingertips. "There's a heartbeat," he whispered, his own heart pounding. "It's alive." "Ethan, listen carefully," Dr. Harper's voice sharpened with professional focus. "Keep them warm, but not hot. If you can get them to respond, try giving small amounts of warm water or broth. But Ethan," she paused, "don't get your hopes up. Even if they survive the next few hours, the damage from the cold—" But Ethan was already moving, grabbing chicken broth from his pantry. He'd raised countless animals back to health over his years on the farm. This one wouldn't be any different. It couldn't be. As he worked, he noticed tiny details about the pup. The white spot on its chest, the slightly crooked ear, the way its paw twitched ever so slightly as warmth began to seep back into its body. Each small movement felt like a miracle, a tiny battle won against death itself. "Fight," he whispered, gently stroking the puppy's head with one finger. "You've made it this far. Just keep fighting." Outside, the farm began to stir with early morning sounds. Distant cows lowing in the pasture, chickens clucking as they woke, and the first birds greeting the dawn. But for once, Ethan didn't rush to begin his morning chores. His world had narrowed to this kitchen, this moment, this tiny life gradually strengthening under his care. As the morning light grew stronger, Ethan could better see the changes in Frost. The puppy's fur, though still matted and dirty, had begun to dry and fluff slightly where the frost had melted away. Its breathing had developed a stronger rhythm, and the violent shivers that had racked its small frame earlier had subsided to occasional tremors. "You're a tough one, aren't you?" Ethan remarked, preparing another dropper of warm broth. This time, when he placed it near Frost's mouth, the puppy's tongue moved slightly, actively seeking the nourishment. "That's right. You're getting stronger." Ethan's own exhaustion began to catch up with him as the adrenaline of the night faded. His back ached from hours in the wooden kitchen chair, and his eyes burned from lack of sleep. But every time he thought about taking a break, Frost would make another small movement, show another sign of improvement, and Ethan would find his second wind. He thought about the tracks he'd seen in the snow, how they'd wandered in confused circles before Frost had finally collapsed. The puppy must have been desperately searching for shelter, for help, for any chance at survival. The thought of what might have happened if he hadn't noticed those tracks sent a chill down Ethan's spine. "Don't worry about that anymore," he told Frost, adjusting the blankets once more. "You're safe now. Whatever happened before, however you ended up out there, that's all in the past." The puppy responded with another soft whimper, as if understanding the promise in Ethan's words. As morning fully arrived, Ethan realized he'd spent the entire night talking to Frost. He'd shared more words in these quiet hours than he usually spoke in a week. Living alone on the farm, he'd grown used to silence, to the simple company of his animals. But something about this small survivor had awakened a long-dormant need for connection. "Guess we both needed someone to talk to," he mused, watching as Frost's paw twitched in what might have been a dream. The morning sun now filled the kitchen with warm light, catching the white spot on Frost's chest and making it glow. It seemed fitting, a new day, a new chance at life, a new beginning for both of them. As the morning progressed, Ethan faced the harsh reality of Frost's condition. Despite surviving the night, the puppy remained critically weak, barely able to lift its head. Each breath seemed to require enormous effort, and although Frost had managed to swallow small amounts of broth, the challenge of proper nutrition loomed large. Dr. Harper arrived shortly after 8, her truck crunching through the snow-covered driveway. She entered the kitchen with her medical bag, her expression shifting from professional detachment to surprise as she saw Frost's condition. "Well, I'll be damned," she muttered, kneeling to examine the puppy. "He's actually hanging in there." The examination revealed the extent of Frost's struggles. "Severe hypothermia has affected his muscles and joints," Dr. Harper explained, her gentle hands moving methodically over the tiny body. "There might be tissue damage we can't see yet, and he's severely undernourished. I'd guess he hadn't eaten for days before the freeze." Ethan's heart sank as he listened to the list of challenges, but his determination remained unchanged. "What do we do?" Dr. Harper began pulling supplies from her bag. Special formula, syringes for feeding, antibiotics, and vitamin supplements. "We fight," she said simply. "Every hour he survives increases his chances. But Ethan," she caught his eye, "this won't be easy. He'll need round-the-clock care, and even then—" "I've got nowhere else to be," Ethan interrupted, his voice firm. He accepted the supplies and listened intently as Dr. Harper demonstrated proper feeding techniques and medication dosages. "The next 48 hours are critical," she explained, packing up her bag. "Call me immediately if anything changes. And Ethan?" She paused at the door, her expression softening. "What did you do last night?" "Most people wouldn't have bothered. Whatever happens, you gave him a chance." After she left, Ethan settled into a routine. Every 2 hours, he carefully administered the special formula using a syringe, supporting Frost's head as the puppy struggled to swallow. He kept detailed notes of medications, feeding times, and any changes in Frost's condition. Between feedings, Ethan performed the gentle physical therapy Dr. Harper had shown him, carefully moving Frost's legs to prevent muscle atrophy. Sometimes the puppy would whimper in discomfort, breaking Ethan's heart, but he persisted, knowing each movement was necessary for recovery. The farm's usual rhythms fell by the wayside. Ethan did only the most essential chores, rushing back to check on Frost. He moved his recliner into the kitchen, catching short naps between feedings, always alert for any sound of distress from his tiny patient. By evening, Frost showed small signs of improvement. His swallowing had grown stronger, and his eyes, though still swollen, had begun to open slightly. Each tiny victory felt enormous to Ethan, who celebrated every successful feeding, every small movement, every moment of progress in this fragile journey toward recovery. 1 week into Frost's recovery, Ethan woke to an unfamiliar sound, a soft scratching against the kitchen floor. He bolted upright in his recliner, momentarily panicked, only to find Frost attempting his first wobbly steps. The puppy's legs trembled with effort, but there was determination in every movement as he tried to push himself up from his blanket nest. "Well, look who's decided to go exploring," Ethan said softly, fighting the urge to immediately help. Dr. Harper had emphasized the importance of letting Frost develop strength on his own when possible. Still, he moved closer, ready to intervene if needed. Frost's first attempt ended in a tumble, his weak legs giving out beneath him. But instead of giving up, he tried again, his small face scrunched with concentration. Each attempt lasted a little longer than the last, and Ethan found himself holding his breath, witnessing the sheer determination of this tiny survivor. Finally, after several attempts, Frost managed to stand on all 4 legs. He swayed slightly like a newborn calf finding its balance, but he remained upright. The triumph in those partly opened eyes was unmistakable, and Ethan felt his own eyes welling up with proud tears. "That's it, boy," he encouraged, watching as Frost took one shaky step, then another. "You've got this." The puppy's ears perked at Ethan's voice, and he turned his head, taking unsteady steps toward the familiar sound. It was the first time Frost had deliberately moved toward him, and something in Ethan's chest tightened at this sign of trust. Throughout the day, Frost continued to practice his newfound mobility. Each hour brought more confidence, though he still tired quickly. His personality began to emerge as well. A surprising stubbornness when he didn't want to take his medicine, a gentle neediness when he wanted attention, and an increasing curiosity about his surroundings. "You're getting to be quite the handful," Ethan commented that evening, watching as Frost investigated a spot of sunlight on the kitchen floor. The puppy's coat was beginning to shine with health, the black and brown fur growing thicker as proper nutrition did its work. The white spot on his chest seemed to glow in the evening light, like a badge of survival. Ethan had started introducing solid food, mixing soft puppy kibble with warm water to create an easily digestible meal. Frost attacked each bowl with increasing enthusiasm, his appetite growing stronger as his body healed. It was a far cry from the desperate drops of broth in those first critical hours. As night fell, Frost made his most ambitious journey yet, a complete circuit of the kitchen, wobbling but determined. When he finally returned to his blanket nest, exhausted but triumphant, he looked up at Ethan with eyes that were now fully open, revealing warm brown depths that seemed to hold both wisdom and innocence. "You're not just surviving anymore, are you?" Ethan mused, reaching down to scratch behind Frost's ears. "You're starting to live." The puppy leaned into his touch, and for the first time, his tail wagged. A small, hesitant movement that nevertheless spoke volumes about his progress. That night, as Frost slept soundly in his blankets, Ethan realized just how far they'd come from that frozen morning in the snow. Each tiny step forward wasn't just about physical healing. It was about trust, hope, and the remarkable resilience of life itself. The night everything changed started normally enough. Ethan had just finished the evening feeding, and Frost was settling into his now familiar routine of exploring the kitchen before bedtime. But something was off. The puppy's usual energetic wobble had been replaced by a sluggish pace, and his eyes looked glassy. "What's wrong, boy?" Ethan knelt beside Frost, his weathered hand gentle as he checked for fever. The heat radiating from the small body made his heart sink. After nearly 2 weeks of steady progress, this sudden change sent fear coursing through his veins. Frost whimpered, a sound so pitiful it made Ethan's chest ache. The puppy tried to stand but stumbled, his legs buckling beneath him. Without hesitation, Ethan scooped him up, cradling him close as he reached for the phone to call Dr. Harper. "Dr. Harper." "His temperature is too high," she said after listening to Ethan's description. "This can happen with severe hypothermia cases. Sometimes the body's healing systems go into overdrive. I'm on my way, but I have started cooling him down gradually. And Ethan?" Her voice softened. "Stay calm. He needs you steady right now." The next hours became a blur of desperate efforts. Ethan used cool clothes on Frost's paws and belly, trying to bring down the fever while keeping him comfortable. The puppy's breathing grew labored, each inhaling a struggle that seemed to take more energy than his tiny body could spare. "Don't you dare give up," Ethan whispered fiercely, his voice breaking. "Not after everything we've been through." But doubt crept in, dark and insidious. Had he been selfish, trying to save this puppy? Had he only prolonged suffering that should have ended peacefully in the snow? Dr. Harper arrived just before midnight, her face grim as she examined Frost. The diagnosis was pneumonia, a common complication in hypothermia cases. She administered antibiotics and showed Ethan how to use a nebulizer to help with breathing. "The next 12 hours are critical," she explained, packing up her supplies. "If he makes it through the night—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Ethan settled into his vigil, holding Frost wrapped in a light blanket. The puppy's usual vibrant energy had vanished, replaced by a stillness that terrified him. Every labored breath seemed like it might be the last. "I'm sorry," he murmured into Frost's fur. "Maybe I should have let you go that morning. Maybe I was just trying to prove something to myself." His voice caught. "But I couldn't walk away. Something in your eyes. You weren't ready to give up. And now I'm asking you not to give up again." Throughout the night, Ethan talked constantly, his voice hoarse but determined. He shared memories of his childhood on the farm, of his parents who had taught him to care for animals, of his dreams and regrets. Anything to let Frost know he wasn't alone in this fight. Around dawn, something shifted. Frost's breathing eased slightly and his fever began to break. When his eyes opened, though still glazed with illness, there was a spark of recognition as he looked at Ethan. That tiny sign of awareness felt like a miracle. Recovery from pneumonia was a slow process, but as Frost regained his strength, something remarkable began to happen. The once timid puppy started following Ethan everywhere around the farmhouse, his wobbly steps becoming more confident with each passing day. If Ethan moved from the kitchen to the living room, the soft click of puppy nails on hardwood would trail behind him. "You're turning into my little shadow," Ethan chuckled one morning, watching as Frost navigated the transition from kitchen tile to living room carpet. The puppy had developed a habit of positioning himself wherever he could keep Ethan in sight, as if afraid his savior might disappear if he looked away too long. During his recovery, Frost's personality blossomed in unexpected ways. He showed a particular interest in Ethan's boots, often attempting to chase them as Ethan walked, though his coordination still needed work. These playful moments usually ended with Frost tumbling over himself, but he always got up, tail wagging, ready to try again. The quiet farmhouse, which had seemed so natural to Ethan for so many years, now felt alive with new energy. He found himself talking more, explaining his daily routines to his attentive audience of one. "Got to check the mail," he'd say, or "time to start dinner," and Frost would cock his head, ears perked, absorbing every word. One evening, as Ethan sat in his recliner reading the newspaper, he felt a gentle pressure against his leg. Looking down, he found Frost had fallen asleep leaning against him, completely trusting and content. The sight stirred something deep in Ethan's heart, a feeling of connection he hadn't experienced in years. "Guess we both needed someone," he mused, carefully setting aside his paper to avoid disturbing the sleeping puppy. The warmth against his leg reminded him of how cold Frost had been that first morning, how close they'd come to never having these moments. As days passed, their routines became synchronized. Frost learned to anticipate Ethan's movements, waiting by the coffee maker in the morning, knowing that's where Ethan would go first. He'd sit patiently by the door when it was time for Ethan's evening walk around the property, though he wasn't yet strong enough to join. The transformation wasn't just in Frost. Ethan found himself smiling more, laughing at the puppy's antics, and feeling a sense of purpose that went beyond his daily farm duties. He started making plans for the future: where to put a dog bed, what toys to buy, how to puppy-proof the house. The loneliness that had become such a familiar companion began to fade. "You know," Ethan said one evening, as Frost attempted to help him fold laundry by pulling at a sock, "I thought I was saving you that morning in the snow, but sometimes I wonder if maybe you were sent to save me too." Frost looked up at him with those soulful brown eyes, now bright with life and love, and Ethan knew their paths had crossed for a reason. The morning Ethan decided to introduce Frost to the outdoors was crisp and clear, worlds away from the bitter cold that had nearly claimed the puppy's life. Dr. Harper had given her approval, noting Frost's remarkable recovery and growing strength. Still, Ethan felt a flutter of anxiety as he opened the farmhouse door. "Easy now," he murmured, watching as Frost approached the threshold. The puppy had grown considerably, his once skeletal frame now healthy and strong. But he moved with unusual caution as he encountered the doorway. At the first touch of fresh air on his nose, Frost froze, his ears pricked forward in high alert. Ethan knelt beside him, providing the reassurance of his presence. "It's okay, boy. This is your home too." He understood Frost's hesitation. The last time the puppy had been outside, he'd nearly died. The memory of finding that frozen bundle in the snow was still vivid in Ethan's mind. Frost took one tentative step onto the porch, then another. His paws touched the wooden boards with deliberate care, testing each plank as if it might disappear beneath him. When a sudden breeze ruffled his fur, he pressed against Ethan's leg, seeking comfort in the familiar. "You're doing great," Ethan encouraged, remaining still and letting Frost set the pace. Gradually, the puppy's natural curiosity began to overcome his fear. His nose worked overtime, taking in the countless new scents of farm life. Hay from the barn, the distant smell of cattle, the earthy aroma of freshly tilled soil. The real test came when Frost encountered snow for the first time since his rescue. A small patch remained in the shadow of the porch, preserved by the cold spring mornings. Frost approached it cautiously, his body tense. But instead of fear, something unexpected happened. He pounced on it playfully, sending small chunks of snow flying. Ethan couldn't help but laugh at the transformation. "Look who's made friends with their old enemy," he said, watching as Frost discovered the joy of playing in the very element that had almost claimed his life. It felt like witnessing a kind of healing, a triumph over trauma. The farm's other residents soon noticed their new companion. A curious chicken wandered over, pecking at the ground near the porch. Frost watched it with fascination, his tail wagging slightly. When the hen came closer, he dropped into a playbow, causing the bird to flutter away in surprise. "Don't worry," Ethan chuckled. "You'll figure out how to make friends." As if on cue, one of the barn cats sauntered past, giving Frost a dismissive glance that seemed to say, "Another newcomer to train." Throughout the morning, Frost's confidence grew. He ventured further from the porch, always keeping Ethan in sight, but exploring with increasing boldness. He discovered the joy of chasing leaves blown by the wind, the interesting textures of different grasses, and the exciting world of farm scents. The transformation from the terrified puppy at the door to this curious explorer filled Ethan with pride. Each new discovery, each brave step forward, was a victory over that frozen morning. Frost wasn't just surviving anymore. He was thriving. Spring bloomed across the farm, bringing with it a remarkable transformation in Frost. The once frozen puppy had blossomed into a strong, energetic young dog, his coat gleaming with health in the warm sunlight. His daily routine now included enthusiastic runs across the fields, his paws flying over the ground that had once nearly claimed his life. Ethan watched with pride as Frost raced through the tall grass, chasing butterflies and investigating every new scent that caught his attention. The timid, weak creature from those first days was just a memory now, replaced by a confident, joyful presence that had brought new life to the entire farm. "You've outdone yourself with this one," Dr. Harper remarked during her latest visit. She had come to give Frost his vaccinations but spent extra time marveling at his progress. "I've never seen such a complete recovery from severe hypothermia. He's not just surviving, he's flourishing." Indeed, Frost had developed his own unique personality quirks that never failed to make Ethan smile. He had a particular way of tilting his head when confused, one ear flopping while the other stood straight. His favorite game involved trying to herd the chickens, though they largely ignored his efforts, much to his apparent frustration. Ethan had built Frost a special heated doghouse, positioned right next to the porch where he could keep an eye on the farm's activities. Though Frost spent most nights inside with Ethan, the doghouse became his daytime retreat, a safe space decorated with soft blankets and favorite toys. "Look at him now," Ethan said proudly, watching as Frost confidently approached a group of visiting neighbor children, his tail wagging in greeting. "Hard to believe this is the same pup we found in the snow." The children giggled as Frost showered them with affection, his previous trauma not dimming his love for people. Word of Frost's remarkable recovery had spread through the small farming community. People would stop by just to see him, amazed by the story of his survival. Each visitor received an enthusiastic welcome from Frost, who seemed to understand their admiration and played up his charm accordingly. Even the local veterinary clinic had put up a photo of Frost in their waiting room, using his story to encourage people never to give up on animals in distress. Dr. Harper often referenced his case when dealing with other emergency situations, pointing to his recovery as proof that sometimes, against all odds, miracles do happen. One particularly meaningful moment came when Frost encountered snow again for the first time since his full recovery. Instead of fear, he displayed pure joy, diving into the fresh powder and rolling around playfully. Ethan had watched with tears in his eyes, realizing that Frost had truly overcome his traumatic beginning. "You're quite the celebrity now," Ethan chuckled as another car pulled into the driveway, likely more visitors coming to meet the miracle puppy. Frost barked happily, already trotting toward the gate to greet them. His transformation from frozen victim to vibrant survivor had become a source of inspiration for everyone who heard his story. Word of Frost's incredible survival story spread through the farming community like wildfire. The local newspaper, the Valley Herald, sent a young reporter named Sarah to cover the tale. She sat at Ethan's kitchen table, the same spot where Frost had fought for his life months ago, scribbling notes as Ethan recounted that fateful morning. "What made you stop to check those tracks?" Sarah asked, watching as Frost dozed contentedly at Ethan's feet. "Most people would have walked right by." Ethan paused, considering. "Something just felt different that morning," he finally said. "Like I was meant to find him. Looking back now, I can't imagine not stopping." Frost's ear twitched at the sound of Ethan's voice, and he shifted closer to his owner's boot. The article, when published, captured more than just Frost's survival story. It highlighted the power of compassion in a world that often seemed too busy to care. The headline read, "Local Farmer's Act of Kindness Saves Frozen Puppy, Inspires Community." The response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from readers across the county, many sharing their own stories of animal rescue and second chances. The local elementary school even invited Ethan and Frost to speak to the children about kindness to animals. "The kids absolutely adore him," Mrs. Thompson, the third-grade teacher, said as Frost gently accepted treats from tiny hands. His story teaches them that one act of kindness can change a life. Frost seemed to understand the importance of his role, displaying infinite patience as small fingers stroked his fur and excitable voices called his name. Inspired by Frost's story, the community began to change. The local shelter reported an increase in adoptions, particularly of animals with special needs or challenging backgrounds. People would often reference Frost when adopting, saying, "If that frozen puppy could become such a wonderful dog, maybe this one just needs a chance too." Ethan found himself becoming an unexpected advocate for animal rescue. What started as casual conversations with shelter volunteers evolved into regular involvement with their programs. He began offering space on his farm for rehabilitating rescued animals, with Frost serving as a gentle, encouraging presence for newcomers. "It's amazing to watch," Linda, a shelter volunteer, remarked one day. "Frost seems to know exactly how to approach the scared ones. It's like he remembers his own journey and wants to help others through theirs." The farm itself transformed, becoming a symbol of hope in the community. People would drive by slowly, hoping to catch a glimpse of Frost playing in the fields or helping Ethan with his daily chores. Children would wave from car windows, and Frost would bark cheerfully in response, his tail wagging with pure joy. "Never thought one small pup could make such a big difference," Ethan mused one evening, watching as Frost greeted yet another carload of visitors. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, casting long shadows across the farm that had become not just a home, but a beacon of hope for the entire community. As spring turned to summer, Frost discovered his true calling on the farm. What started as simple curiosity about the farm animals evolved into a natural talent for herding that left Ethan amazed. The first sign came one morning when a group of chickens wandered too far from their coop. Before Ethan could intervene, Frost was already in motion, circling the straying birds with natural precision. His movements were fluid and purposeful, gently guiding the chickens back toward their enclosure without causing panic. When the last chicken crossed the threshold, Frost sat proudly, tail wagging, looking to Ethan for approval. "Well, would you look at that?" Ethan murmured, watching as Frost repeated the process with another group of wandering fowl. "Seems you've found your calling, boy." The puppy's intelligence became more evident with each passing day as he learned the farm's rhythms and routines with remarkable speed. One particularly memorable morning, Ethan woke to Frost's urgent barking. Not his usual friendly greeting, but a sharp, insistent alarm. Following the sound, he found a fox attempting to raid the chicken coop. Frost stood guard, his posture confident and protective, keeping the predator at bay until Ethan could secure the area. "You're more than just a pet now," Ethan praised, scratching behind Frost's ears after the incident. "You're a working dog through and through." The pride in his voice was matched by Frost's wagging tail and bright eyes, clearly pleased with his new role as protector of the farm. Frost's duties expanded naturally. He learned to help gather the cattle for feeding time, his presence calm but authoritative as he moved among the much larger animals. The cows, initially wary of the new addition, soon accepted him as part of their daily routine, some even lowering their heads in greeting as he passed. During harvest season, Frost proved invaluable in keeping rabbits and deer away from the crops. His patrols of the fields became part of the farm's natural rhythm, as regular as sunrise and sunset. He seemed to understand the importance of his work, taking his responsibilities seriously while maintaining his playful spirit. Even the local farmers began to notice Frost's abilities. "Never seen a dog take to farm work so naturally," old Jim Peterson remarked one day, Watching Frost expertly herd a group of wayward sheep back to their pen, especially one with no formal training. It's like he was born for this life. The transformation from frozen puppy to skilled working dog wasn't lost on Ethan. Every time he watched Frost confidently navigating the farm's challenges, he remembered that cold morning and the tiny, lifeless bundle in the snow. Now that same dog moved with purpose and pride, an essential part of the farm's operation. "You've come a long way," Ethan reflected one evening, as Frost completed his final rounds of the property. The setting sun cast long shadows across the fields, and Frost's black and brown coat gleamed in the golden light. He had grown into his role with a grace and intelligence that continued to surprise and impress everyone who visited the farm. Inspired by Frost's remarkable journey, Ethan made a decision that would transform his farm into something more than just a working homestead. After consulting with Dr. Harper and local shelter officials, he began converting one of his empty barns into a rehabilitation center for rescued animals. "If one frozen puppy could bring so much change," Ethan explained to Dr. Harper as they surveyed the barn's renovation, "imagine what we could do for other animals in need." Frost stood beside them, his tail wagging as if understanding the importance of their discussion. The renovation took weeks of hard work. Ethan installed heating systems, created comfortable recovery spaces, and set up a quarantine area for newly arrived animals. Local volunteers, touched by Frost's story, offered their help, turning the project into a community effort. "It's amazing what your story has inspired," Sarah, the newspaper reporter, remarked during a follow-up visit. She watched as Frost gently approached a recently rescued collie, still skittish from its ordeal on the streets. The transformation in Frost's demeanor was remarkable, from playful farm dog to calm, nurturing presence. What surprised everyone most was Frost's natural ability to connect with traumatized animals. He seemed to know instinctively which ones needed space and which needed companionship. His presence had a calming effect on new arrivals, as if he could communicate through some unspoken language of shared experience. "He remembers," Dr. Harper observed, watching Frost curl up beside a trembling puppy rescued from a drainage ditch. "He knows what it's like to be scared and alone. That's why they trust him." The puppy, which had rejected all human contact, gradually relaxed against Frost's warm body. The rehabilitation program grew steadily. Local shelters began sending their most challenging cases, animals that needed extra time and attention before they could be adopted. Ethan's farm became known as a place of healing, where animals could recover at their own pace. Frost took his role as mentor seriously. He would spend hours with new arrivals, showing them the farm's routines, teaching them through example that humans could be trusted. His patience seemed endless, especially with the youngest and most frightened animals. "Look at him," Ethan said proudly one morning, watching as Frost guided a limping shepherd mix around the property. "He's teaching them how to be dogs again." The shepherd, initially too scared to leave its kennel, had blossomed under Frost's gentle guidance. The local community continued to support the initiative. Farmers donated hay and feed. Veterinary students volunteered their time, and families would visit to socialize with the animals. Each success story strengthened their resolve to help more animals in need. One particularly touching moment came when they welcomed their first frozen puppy, a situation eerily similar to Frost's own story. Frost stayed by the puppy's side throughout its recovery, as if passing on the gift of hope he had received that cold morning so many months ago. The rehabilitation center became more than just a place for animals to heal physically. It became a sanctuary where broken spirits could mend, where fear could transform into trust, and where each animal could find its own path to recovery. Frost was at the heart of it all, a living testament to the power of second chances. Local schools began organizing field trips to the farm, teaching children about animal care and compassion. Frost would greet each group of students with his characteristic gentleness, allowing tiny hands to pet him while Ethan shared his story. The children would leave with a deeper understanding of kindness and the importance of never giving up on those in need. "This is your legacy, boy," Ethan told Frost one evening as they watched the sunset together. You've shown us all that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the darkest moments." Frost leaned against his leg, his warm presence a constant reminder of that miraculous winter morning that had changed everything. 3 years had passed since that fateful winter morning when Ethan found a frozen puppy in the snow. Standing on his porch in the early morning light, he watched as Frost patrolled the farm with confident strides, his black and brown coat gleaming with health and vitality. "Hard to believe you're the same dog," Ethan murmured, sipping his morning coffee. Frost's ears perked at his voice, and the dog bounded over, tail wagging with the same enthusiasm he showed every morning. Despite the passing years, he had never lost his joy for life or his deep bond with the man who saved him. The farm had changed dramatically since Frost's arrival. What was once a quiet, solitary homestead had become a bustling sanctuary. The rehabilitation center now housed dozens of animals at any given time, each with their own story of survival. Frost moved among them like a seasoned counselor, offering comfort and guidance to newcomers while maintaining his duties as the farm's guardian. "Remember when it was just us?" Ethan asked, reaching down to scratch behind Frost's ears. The dog leaned into his touch, those soulful brown eyes meeting his with understanding. Together they had built something neither could have imagined on that cold winter morning, a place of hope, healing, and second chances. Dr. Harper, who still made regular visits, often remarked that Frost's story had changed the way people in their community viewed animal rescue. "You two proved that every life has value," she said during her latest visit, "no matter how hopeless things might seem." As they walked their morning rounds, Ethan and Frost passed the spot where they first met. Though no trace of that desperate morning remained, Ethan never forgot the sight of that tiny, frozen bundle in the snow. Every success story at their sanctuary, every animal that found healing and hope, was a tribute to that moment of compassion. The sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the spring air. Frost trotted ahead, checking on their current residents, a limping mare, 2 recovering shelter dogs, and a litter of abandoned kittens. Each animal greeted him with recognition and trust, drawing strength from his calm presence. "You know what, boy?" Ethan said as they completed their rounds. "Sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we choose hope over doubt, love over fear." Frost wagged his tail, pressing against Ethan's leg in what seemed like agreement. Looking out over their transformed farm, Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude. What had started as one man's solitary life had become a mission of healing and hope, all because of a half-frozen puppy who refused to give up. Together, they had proven that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could create the most profound changes. As another day began at their sanctuary, Ethan and Frost stood side by side, ready to continue their work of healing and transformation. Their story had become more than just a tale of survival. It was a testament to the enduring power of compassion, second chances, and the unbreakable bond between a man and the dog who changed his life forever. "Come on, boy," Ethan said softly. "We've got work to do." And together, they walked into the morning light, ready to face whatever new challenges awaited them, knowing that as long as they had each other, anything was possible. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in second chances. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful beginnings can come from the coldest moments. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us of the power of compassion and hope.